Hi, my name's Anna Serin. I'm Director of Listings Development with the Canadian Securities Exchange. You're joining us here today as part of our Summit on Responsible Investment online series. I am very lucky to be joined by Keerit Jutla. Thank you for joining us, Keerit.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Keerit has filled some very wonderful shoes at AME, the Association for Mineral Exploration. He is the president and CEO. You've been with them now for a year, is that right?
Yeah, just over a year. So started last year in September, and it's been a fantastic year, busy year, but it's been great.
Well, they're very lucky to have you and some of the work that you've been doing. Kendra Johnson was amazing for AME as well, but we're happy that you've filled her shoes in her departure. We will get into AME and what you do within the community, but also you're here today as part of our SORI initiative because of some of your background. So why don't we start and tell us all about you?
Sure. So from Southern Ontario. Did an undergrad and master's degree out there in political economy of natural resources. And I've always been fascinated with Canada's natural resource economy, but also have a strong passion for reconciliation. And when I look at those two things, I look at them as they don't need to be at odds with each other. So that's what led me to go to the University of Alberta, where I did a law MBA degree, where I focused on regulatory law, Aboriginal law, but also in how we, build projects, how we, build relationships and what attracts capital. And I practiced law for about 8 years and came out to Vancouver, worked in government for a couple of years, and then AME came knocking, and I'm really excited to be here. And like you noted, Kendra has just been a phenomenal and continues to be a phenomenal, supported institution at AME, and it's fantastic to learn from her and also try to fill those shoes as well. So
now, your work when you worked with the government, and correct me if I'm wrong, you did a lot of work with First Nations relationships as well as sustainability within the mining space. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So I was at the Environmental Assessment Office for about a year, and then Major Mines focused on negotiations with First Nations, looking at sustainability initiatives, and also looking at what are some of those barriers or what are some of those opportunities that exist with respect to getting projects going.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, why don't we start there then? I want to start having a conversation around our relationship specifically to the mining space. And today we'll talk about BC mining because that's where we are right now. We're in Vancouver, BC. And obviously you with AME. What is our current relationship with First Nations and the mining sector in BC?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think there are good relationships that exist, but there's always room to do better, right? And I think, for those, can I give a little quick background about AME as well, if that's
Absolutely.
okay? So, one of the things, the Association for Mineral Exploration has been around since around 1912. We have over 5,000 members who are either operating in British Columbia or who are based in British Columbia. And just as a quick note is there are several other mining entities. There's a Mining Association of British Columbia that focus on operating mines, whereas the Association for Mineral Exploration looks at, if we want to meet our critical minerals future down the road, we're going to need more greenfield exploration. We're going to need more mines, right? So with that, as you noted, it requires a strong focus on relationships with First Nations. So where I think we are here now in British Columbia is in 2019, the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act was enacted. And with that, a number of different initiatives and relationships. So where I think we're at right now is we have a good understanding and a good footing on what we want to accomplish. And now it's just about how are we going to get there? And I think organizations like ours at AME are active in building relationships, in building policy, and looking at, how do we, tangibly build that stronger relationship-driven, reconciliation-centric mining and mineral exploration economy that we all want to see and benefit from.
Okay, and what is it that we want to accomplish? How does a good defined relationship with First Nations and BC help with the mining sector? Mm-hmm. How do those two meet?
I think ultimately at its root principle, any type of relationship that has its foundation in mutual respect is always, I think, the right way to approach anything, whether it's person to person, company to company, but especially in the work with natural resources and First Nations, right? So I think that what we're seeing now is a greater emphasis on, value above compliance, right?
Right.
So there are minimum standards, for whether it's legally or regulations on how you would work with First Nations. But I think what is very clear is that, that'll only maybe get you to the door. But if you truly want to build, a great project with mutual benefit, regardless of the size, is you'll need to put the time into building a respectful relationship with a First Nation and a First Nation community. So whether it's here, in Vancouver or, the traditional territory of Musqueam, Squamish, or Tsleil-Waututh,
Yeah.
or anywhere else in British Columbia, I think we have a great opportunity to say, hey, there we can do this, not just at the major project, but in all aspects of the industry, is looking at how you build tangible and reciprocal relationships with First Nations.
Now, do the First Nations have, at this point, is there any element of permitting that is associated with their approval? Are they part of this formalized process we have with mineral titles or the Mineral Titles Act at this point?
That's a really good question. So right now, one of the key things that AME is working on and working with government on is the modernization of the Mineral Tenure Act. The other key item that we're working on with government is how we build a consultation-based staking system, which is going to be one of the first in the country.
Okay.
So those are new things.
Consultation from First Nations.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So effectively, there was a court case about a year ago that said the chief gold commissioner has a duty to consult with First Nations when you look to stake mineral claims,
Okay.
pursuant to the Mineral Tenure Act. So when you stake a claim, that doesn't mean you own the land or the resources. It just gives you that right to explore, right?
Okay.
But I think in all things now, what is quite evident is, regardless of what the legal standard is you have to approach it with a very respectful relationship, right?
Right.
Whether it is, the analogy I kind of like to use as well is, if you were, sitting at home, watching TV, and someone was just in your backyard, just walking around, it would be reasonable for you to say, like, what's going on there, right? Similarly, in the exploration space is what we really, not only encourage, but, emphasize and almost expect from our membership is engage early and engage often.
Right.
Is if you are contemplating exploration activity, reach out to the nation, ask for a meeting, explain what you're doing, why you're doing it, who's going to be there. The earlier you engage with a nation, especially at the inceptions of ideas that you have in the exploration or mining industry, the better, right? So I think that's now where AME is assisting our membership, saying, traditionally, I think a lot of this work would be with bigger companies with more capital, right? A lot of the relationship efforts take, they can take the form of impact benefit agreements or, require more time. So I think what's amazing that we're doing at AME is looking at it, well, how do we do that at the inceptions of ideas at the earliest stages? Yeah, that is in a way that is manageable for our membership, for, prospectors or juniors, but is also building a solid foundation of a relationship between the industry at large and whichever nation that we're working with.
And based on your experience, have you found that they are engaging with this process as well? Do the First Nations want to be a part of this process, and are they welcoming the opportunity of building deeper relationships with the mining community?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the key things is there is a strong desire, and always is, to work together.
Yeah.
And to build collaborative, mutual, respectful discussions. But that requires now a paradigm shift in terms of how the whole industry approaches a lot of these issues. And I think one of those things is if I came to you and, was friendly and was saying, hey, it's really
You're
great to
very
meet
friendly,
you. It's
Keerit.
really great to meet you. I really like talking to you.
Yeah.
By the way, can I grab, 4 cups of coffee and can I use your photocopier? You might start thinking, hold on a second, do you actually want to be friends with me or do you want, the photocopier and coffee? And I think, look, there's in any type of discussion in which the goal is mutual benefit, truly that conversation has to begin without any pretense or expectation.
Right.
And it's just that, we want to do work together. We sincerely want to
Right.
figure out how we do this together and to show that deference and respect. And, it might not be in that very first meeting saying, oh, that's great. You're fantastic. Okay, go and do whatever. It might take a little bit of time. The key question now is, how do we build a process that has certainty, predictability, and kind of like transparent timelines in how we can do that relationship building process? And I'm quite confident we can do that.
I was just going to say, I think one of the most important elements of this will be a very defined, clear understanding of what the relationship's meant to be, what kind of communication is required. And I think the early leaders in building these relationships will probably be the most successful, because once that's been established of exactly what you need to do to build that relationship, it'll be formulaic. Whereas the people that are getting involved now and make the efforts to build that relationship might succeed above the rest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's it's like that Wayne Gretzky quote where, you don't skate to where the puck is, you skate to where the puck is going.
Right.
And I think for everyone in our industry is, you can either wait for a decision to be made.
Wait to be compliant.
You can either wait to be compliant, or you can start putting in the work now to say, how do we build that respectful relationship? And if you don't know how to, that's where AME is here. That's what we're building out, is those processes to say, we have the tools, we have the capabilities, we have the pathways, but we're also doing that direct relationship building as well with different nations. We've recently partnered with 2 incredible young Indigenous entrepreneurs from Turtle Island Connection.
Yes, tell us about Turtle Island.
Absolutely. So 2 fantastic young men, Edgar and Ethan. I've learned a lot from them, and likewise. And that's where reconciliation starts. It's person to person, right? And what we've done is, they approached AME saying we'd like to build, a committee at AME. And our response was, you should have your own table and we would love to come sit there. And I don't know if that was necessarily expected by them.
Right.
But it was the start of something quite fantastic, right? So we've partnered, now looking to build, and the vision is with Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth who are in the industry to be able to collaborate together, right? And to be able to now build these relationships quite early on. So those are some of those examples, right? The other thing is...
Well, we chuckled earlier because they're not actually that young, but they certainly are the next generation.
Exactly.
And I say this because I won't reveal their age on this podcast, but they are of the same age of the next generation of investor that's coming to the table. So I think we're seeing a convergence of activism and relationship building within the mining space, but also the investors coming to the table saying, if I'm going to invest in the mining sector, I expect to see these types of elements that are being developed within the companies that I'm investing in, the thought leaders that are helping build these relationships, and the organizations such as AME, right?
100%. Actually, so Ethan is involved in quite a bit in Indigenous banking and looking at a lot of those, how we attract capital. And exactly to your point is that, reconciliation has to be beyond just performative. Right. Truly has to be in action. And I've heard time and time again from Indigenous leadership is, hey, we're not opposed to mineral exploration or mining or natural resource development. Is we have to be there as early as possible, right, to help shape that. And I think initiatives like that bring that certainty and bring that trust that then lets anyone who's looking to invest in the investment community saying, this is a stable project, this is a certain project, and this is a safe place to invest money. And I think here in British Columbia we are building those processes and being the first ones, in the world to start doing that.
That's right.
And that's what makes BC an incredible place to invest in. And in my view, organizations like the CSE, great places for some of our members to start listing on, right? Because we're having these conversations and building these expectations.
Well, thank you for that pitch. We do appreciate you at the CSC.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move over a little bit to sustainability.
Sure.
So, one thing that I remind people that are investing in the mining space, when we talk about ESG programs or sustainable practices when it comes to mining and exploration, if you are involved in any way, shape, or form in Canada in exploration or mining, you're already a global leader when it comes to sustainable practices, ESG practices, diversity, health and safety, everything we're probably one of the leaders. So we already have that, but what are you seeing in BC? Does BC stand out? What innovation are you seeing? Tell us about that within the mining space.
Yeah. Canada is one of the leaders, if not the leader, in environmental standards, health and safety standards, as you noted, and in the way that we engage not only public stakeholders, but also consult and discharge that important duty to consult with Indigenous peoples, First Nation, Métis, and Inuit. Now, we have that opportunity to do that even better with more comprehensive principles that have come out of DRIPA. I think now the key question, and this is something that is always rooted in, in my past life as a lawyer, I'm a recovering lawyer here, is certainty is also contingent upon certainty of the rules, right? So what are the rules? What do I have to do? How do I have to follow them? And what are some key principles that can at least guide me to go value above compliance, right? I think in any game you play, you need goalposts, right?
Right.
And the goalposts have to stay in place in order to know, to have that certainty, predictability. So here in British Columbia, I think we have already the best environmental, assessment system. And I think one of the things that we now have to look at, and I think we've seen this in this past year, is to really be, I think, proud of already those key systems we have in place. So sometimes when I see newer, legislative initiatives, whether it's federally or provincially, I think, hold on a second, is this addressing a key need? Or are we saying, hey, we have our seatbelt buckled, but now we're putting on a helmet, elbow pads, knee pads, and even though the speed limit says 100, we're going to drive at 50. So, and the way that kind of look at it is like, we have to make sure that we don't have overly onerous regulations and standards when we have standards that are already world leading.
Right.
And I think that is one of those key questions that we've said federally and provincially, saying, hey, in order to identify that, we'll need to talk to everyone, right? And, First Nations, industry, the investment community, right? And we need to have a holistic approach to how we ensure we have the right goalposts in the right place. Secondly, though, I think that it's amazing. I think the work that we're doing in now to build, as you said, what does the future of ESG look like? And one of the things sometimes
depending on the month, that's a good word or a bad word.
Exactly.
But the sentiment is there. Everyone agrees that these are practices we want to develop.
Exactly. If we look at it at its root, because I've heard from some folks who ask, what does ESG mean? Is ESG just a reincarnation of CSE, social license to operate,
right.
all of these different terms?
It's pretty broad.
Yeah, in terms of that broadness. Or is it something tangible in the sense of something that can be identified and measured, that someone who's investing can say, okay, these standards are here, right? And I think the way that we can look at that is, yes, the depth of a relationship, if that is demonstrated by some type of relationship agreement, even if it's early on, and also looking at what type of potential joint, environmental monitoring or inclusion of First Nations in some of those company to nation processes exist, right? There's amazing companies in British Columbia who are doing that already, like Skeena Resources, Teck, Newmont, North Isle, FPX, the list goes on and on. Like there's
Right.
amazing companies doing that work already.
Right.
Now what we want to do is say, okay, we can either, like we said before, wait for government to legislate it,
Yeah.
or in industry for us to build predictable ways that folks can do it at all levels.
Well, and I think at the end of the day, money speaks, right? Capital usually will create the flow of where things happen. And I think as a generation and as we continue to evolve, as consumers, we're making sustainable choices. We're making different choices in every time we enter a grocery store,
Right.
we have anything as far as consumership, when we buy our vehicles, when we choose our vacations. And I think the same is happening in investment. And I think that's pushing a lot of the innovation and change forward. Don't you think?
I do. Absolutely. I think we were both in Beaver Creek as well, the
That's
investment
right.
conference, and I've spoken to a lot of young investors as well. And, we were chatting before. I showed you a quote from the late Ratan Tata, who is a key businessman in India. And his philosophy in business and investment was, you're not here just for the bottom line. It's what are you giving back?
That's right.
And what are you contributing in terms of a philanthropic, good, valued, and principled approach, right, in terms of business. And that is something that I see the younger investment community looking at.
Absolutely.
I think we have an incredible new generation coming up. Now I feel old. I just turned 40, and now I'm saying the young folks coming up. But it is incredible investors who are able to on their phone invest, but also a generation of young people who are looking and have been raised in a paradigm in which a lot of these issues in the world have been
That's right.
pushed to them very early on.
That's right.
So, one of my nephew, he's doing his MBA right now. He said, like, I want to look at things from an innovative and solutions oriented perspective in all things
It's
I do.
incredible, isn't it?
And that's the thing is like, I didn't talk like that when I was his age,
Yeah.
right? That's what younger people who are saving money, who are looking and doing things like in a fiscally responsible
right.
way are now looking at, I want to be part of a solution. So where do I invest, 10 grand, 20 grand, to contribute to that solution? So I
Absolutely.
think that's where we need to do a better job to resonate and communicate, saying, look, on all scales of the industry and what we do, here's how you can be a part of this solution. Here's where you, as providing, 10 grand or 20 grand, can then break the paradigm or the perceptions that mining equals bad or this equals good, saying, wait a minute, this industry is actually a very strong progressive one that is socially conscious and environmentally conscious. And that is going to be demonstrated by some of those small scale investments. So I think we have an incredible opportunity now, and that's what's building, and that's what AME wants to see grow.
I think the other thing that's exciting is that, as I was telling you earlier, my family's been in the mining space for generations. And I think there was a period of time where we saw less inflow of within the workforce into the mining space. I think there was a fear around the mining and exploration space. And I think with these sustainable practices, we're starting to see young people come back to the sector. They're actually getting, engineering degrees, and they're starting to develop new technology around sustainable practices. We're starting to see an inflow of that next generation, even from a workforce perspective, come to the sector, which is what is also needed, not only capital into the space. Okay, let's talk about AME for a moment. You gave us a little synopsis of what AME does, but I think that, AME, if you are in British Columbia, it has quite a big presence. You've done an amazing job with your presence here. Every year you have your annual Roundup show, which most people know. People travel from all over the world to come to. But tell us about what AME is working on right now and what you're trying to achieve within the community.
Sure. In the past year, I think one of the key things that we want to achieve is to really break those perceptions about mineral exploration and mining, but not through, a public relations campaign, but through action, right? And, through building some of these tables with, Turtle Island Connection, working closely with other amazing Indigenous leaders like Gina Jackson and supporting the Bears Lair youth camps to really start breaking these perceptions and to do this learning as early as possible. The key things that we're involved with is being involved in policy development. I think a key thing as well for any industry association is to really be responsive to their membership, right? So we have over 5,000 members, and one of the things we heard this past summer in our What We Heard report is from all over BC is everyone wants to go to the same direction, but there's apprehension or anxiety about how we're going to get there, and
Right.
to ensure that everyone
Clarity.
like everyone is brought on board together. So that's a key thing that we're doing, and being really proactive as a policy and thought leader is looking at how do we engage so many different stakeholders to build policy and regulation and laws that work for everyone, right? I think another key thing that we are doing, and we're seeing more and more of it now, is how do people get involved? How do people
Right.
invest? And how do we create those pathways for members and prospective members to do that? So we're doing that quite actively with engaging a lot of different universities and younger people who are looking to get involved, not only in the engineering side of things, on the
Right.
investment side of things. We're also engaging with a lot of people in Canada, but also internationally, to really demonstrate British Columbia and Canada as a great place to do business and to invest in.
Yep.
We were just chatting before I met with a delegation from Saudi Arabia, and it was fantastic. Again, really great group of people, but looking at, hey, we have so much talent and capital, so do you. How do we work together, right?
Right.
And one of the things that really stood out was he said, this is the first time we've spoken to someone in 6 years. And I thought, 6 years? Like, how come we're not having more of these conversations?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's a lot of the work that we're doing as well, is to get out there and to really showcase British Columbia, showcase, our talent, to show the incredible commitment we have to reconciliation, to continue to learn. But also the other thing that, we're doing at AME as well is to engage with the entire breadth of our membership. And one of the things I really appreciated when we were chatting earlier is learning about you and your family's background in mining, right?
That's right.
And I think one of those things that is going to really, truly bring us together and drive us forward is for us to all see each other and listen to each other,
Yeah.
and hear each other, and to be able to say, no matter where your background is, whether you are, English, Scottish, French, Indigenous, Punjabi, whatever, to say, like, we all have a great connection into this shared land and history, and how do we learn about it, hear each other, come together and build it forward genuinely. So to answer your question about what AME is doing is, we want to bring people together, showcase this incredible natural resource economy we have in BC and mineral exploration. But now we've seen such an influx in interest is just showcasing the natural resource economy in Canada.
Yeah.
That's what we're getting asked to do a lot as well.
Keerit, I could listen to you forever. We're going to have to do a part 2 of this podcast. I'm so excited for AME to have you on board and to fill those wonderful shoes.
Can I throw in one more thing as well?
Please.
And this was a AME Roundup, January 20th, 23rd, going to be incredible. We have a incredible new day in which there's going to be more conversations like this. So please come and attend Roundup, register today. And there's going to be some other amazing folks who will be there as well, like yourselves. So,
Absolutely. Roundup is an institution in Vancouver every year, and we're very excited about it. Listen, it's been so lovely to chat with you. Please come back and tell us more. If we could just end off with one thing, what in the mining community specifically, whether you're an investor, an explorer, a miner, if you're working, on site or, corporate in the city, what's your advice to the mining community of what we should be doing next to build relationships and better sustainable practices? Where would you start?
I would start by, walking the talk.
Other than becoming an AME member.
Other than becoming an AME member. Very good. AME and CSE member, both of the organizations. But I think to really, start practicing some of these key items is, let's see more incredible Indigenous leaders in higher levels of management in a lot of our different mining and mineral exploration companies, seeing more women in these companies, right? Not because it's a DEI check, it's because the clear skill set and merits are all there,
Yeah.
right? So let's see that reflected
Absolutely.
in our boards and our industries, right? I think another key thing is let's stay optimistic. There's a lot going on right now, right? There's a lot of
It's been an interesting few years.
it's been an interesting few years, right? And yes, we do need to be mindful of all of these things. We do need to be critical and respectfully critical, but also to be optimistic. Like we are building amazing things here. We're at the cutting edge of this on the world, right?
Yeah.
So this is the place to invest, right? And entities like AME and CSC, we're actually operationalizing that. So
amazing.
For folks to stay positive, stay happy, the cycles are the cycles, but we will get through it like we always do, and capital will continue to come.
Well, I think you and I are both lovers of the mineral exploration space and beautiful British Columbia and the capital market. So I feel very positive on that note. Thank you again for joining us, Keerit.
Thank you.
We'll chat again soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.